Hey legends, Jimmy here from James Live Photography with another video. Today we're going to be talking about intimate weddings and the 10 reasons why they might be perfect for you. So let's do it. Now before we start, what actually is an intimate wedding? Well, there are no real hard and fast rules as to what an intimate wedding is, but basically speaking, it's a smaller, more micro version of a wedding, between 10 and 50 guests. Less than 10 guests, and you're looking more at an elopement. And you can check out my other video for what an elopement is, but between 10 and 50 guests, you're looking at kind of an intimate wedding. Intimate weddings also tend to be a little bit more low-key in scale. Often you can have them at a private property or like an Airbnb or a Ripper ride, something like that. They're not always at venues. They can be at venues, but sometimes, quite often actually, they're not. They're somewhere, you know, like they're either out in the bush, the forest, the beach, something like that, and then they hold their kind of like reception at a private property. Also, they often are less traditional than weddings, so you'll find that there's a lot less rigidity to the structure and the timeline and kind of the things that you have to do. So now that we know what an intimate wedding is, we have a better idea of what it is, let's talk about the 10 reasons or the 10 benefits of having one. Number one, price. Now this kind of goes without saying. The average cost of a wedding in Australia, I believe, is somewhere around about $36,000. Which is quite a lot of money. And of course, weddings can go significantly more than that. You know, there are weddings up to, $250,000, $500,000. Then of course, there are weddings that are cheaper than $36,000, but the average seems to be somewhere around there. So an intimate wedding, on the other hand, is gonna save you a lot of money. Majority of the cost of a wedding comes from the guests, the head count, the cost per head. So in Australia, particularly where I am, Hunter Valley, the average cost per head is around about $150 to $160 per person. So if you're inviting, say, 100 people, which is a pretty standard sized wedding, you're looking at $15,000 to $16,000. Now, if you're going to do an intimate wedding and only invite, say, 40 people, well, you're looking more along the lines of $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 as opposed to $15,000, $16,000. As you can see, it's already like nearly a $10,000 saving just by reducing your head count. Number two, intimacy. What do I mean by intimacy? So with a traditional wedding, and you've probably seen this as a guest at weddings, the couple in question, they don't often get a lot of time to spend with their guests. Why? Because there's so many people, they're trying to make it around to everybody, to say thank you for coming and all that sort of stuff. But it's really surface level sort of conversation that they're having. Thanks for coming. I'm so glad you're here. How's the family been? That sort of thing. It's not really in depth. It's not an intimate kind of conversation. And what I've noticed from my experience in the industry is a lot of couples tend to neglect their close friends and family and try and spend more time with the fringe friends and family because they don't want them to feel left out, and they know that their real friends will be okay with it, they'll understand. So effectively what's happening is you're spending less time with the people that you really care about and more time with the people that you don't. Another thing is that traditionally speaking at weddings, you don't spend a whole lot of time with your partner. I know it sounds insane, it sounds really weird, but most of the time you spend kind of doing this, you're moving from one place to the next, you're constantly on the go. With an intimate wedding, things run a lot slower because there's a lot less rigidity in the timeline, there's more flexibility, there's less people. So not only do you get to spend more time with your guests, you get to spend more time with each other. You can carve out half an hour to go and sit outside and watch the sunset and get some nice photos and just kind of hang out together. It's gonna allow for more flexibility and more intimacy. Number three, less drama. Now this one is kind of contentious because people get a little bit frustrated and upset when I mention it, but we've all been to weddings before and we've all seen people when they're drunk. And sometimes people kick off, sometimes there's some underlying family beef or something, whatever it is, and something kicks off. Someone gets upset, someone gets angry. I've seen fist fights, I've seen glasses thrown at people, I've seen everything as both a guest and as a photographer. So generally speaking, intimate weddings, so the lower the number of people is going to automatically help deal with that. But it's mainly that the people you've got coming are so much more close to you that you can expect them to control themselves. Even if, for example, you've got an uncle and another uncle, the brothers that don't get along, if they're really close to you, you can expect that they're going to be able to put that aside for today and give you the best day of your life. Whereas when you're inviting, 200 people and you've got so-and-so's boyfriend and so-and-so's girlfriend coming and they hate each other, they don't care about you enough to not fight when they get drunk because they don't really know you. They're just your friend's partner. So by making sure the guest count is lower and that the guests that are there are more closely connected with you, you're going to reduce the drama. Number 4, stress. The smaller the wedding, the smaller the stress. It's pretty simple. The first reason is obviously financial. The smaller the wedding, the smaller the cost, generally speaking, and so therefore less stress. The other thing is, without having to worry about, should I invite this person, should I not invite that person, by having an intimate sized wedding and putting a blanket rule of no partners that we don't know, no extended family and stuff like that, you make it a lot easier for yourself, because instead of going, oh, we'll invite that partner, but I don't think we'll invite that partner, I don't know, what do you think we should do? Now you're creating a lot of stress because they're going to be happy and then they're going to be angry, and then you've got contentious kind of feelings and arguments between friends. It's not worth it. Smaller weddings, less stress, less financial stress. It's a great thing. Number 5, they're easier to plan. Again, you can see it's all kind of flowing here. The smaller the wedding, the less vendors that you usually need, and that makes it easier to plan. So with an intimate wedding at a private property, you're gonna find that you don't necessarily need a wedding coordinator. You don't necessarily need a stylist. You don't necessarily need staff to cater everything. You might just get yourself a celebrant, photographer, filmmaker, some florals, and then someone will just help you put it together at the property. Something along those lines. I think the average wedding in Australia has 21 vendors, which is a lot. That's a lot of people to keep track of, a lot of people to go and find and book in. I find that with an intimate wedding, there's a lot less vendors involved. It tends to just be the ones that you really, truly need, and that makes it a lot easier to plan. Also, tying it back into financial the financial aspect, it's easier to plan because it's easier to budget for and it's easier to save for. That makes a big difference. Number 6, location. Location. What do I mean by location? So with a traditional wedding, typically speaking, you're locked into a traditional venue. So if you're gonna have, 200 people at a wedding, you can't really have it just down at the local beach. I mean, you can, but it's gonna be a nightmare. I would not recommend it. So you're kind of locked into like a normal wedding venue with a, ceremony and all that sort of stuff. With an intimate wedding, when you've got, say, 30, 40 people, you can kind of have it anywhere. You can find a gorgeous Airbnb in my area, like in the Hunter Valley. And as long as it's on, say, like an acre, you just order in 2 long tables, 40 chairs, and boom, you have your wedding there, no problems. If you wanted to have it down at the beach, that's not going to be too difficult. You want to have it out in the forest, it's not going to be too difficult because we're not talking about a lot of people here. It makes it much easier to plan at a variety of different locations outside of the traditional venues. Number 7, photography. Now, yes, you're obviously going to get photography at a traditional wedding as well. However, what I'm kind of saying here is the way intimate weddings run, they're a lot more free-flowing, a lot more flexible. There's a lot more give in them. And that creates a feeling of more creativity, particularly in me. I can only really talk about myself, but I know that when I'm not, penned into a timeline really, really rigidly, and I'm constantly looking at my watch, making sure that I'm on time, I get to feel a lot more creative. And when I feel a lot more creative, I create much better imagery. And I would assume that's probably pretty similar for most photographers and most creatives in general. Also, because with intimate weddings, they're usually a lot more time devoted to having a good time. Like, you're not rushing from here to there, you don't have super strict receptions that you've got to get back to. Oftentimes when I've done them, we've had a little bit longer to play around with the portraits, which means that we get to go exploring, we get to like adventure and kind of go and find some really cool spots. It just means that we get to do cooler things. With a traditional wedding, and I'm not saying you can't get cool photos at a traditional wedding, but more often than not, you kind of are staying where you are. So like if you're getting married at, say, a winery, that's kind of where you'll do your photos, whatever is on the property, whatever's on the, on the grounds. Whereas with an intimate wedding, you can get in the car, you can go for a little drive, you can do all that sort of stuff because you've got a little bit more time up your sleeve because the timeline isn't as tight. Number 8, make it an adventure. This is kind of going back to like the locations that I was talking about, in the sense that with a traditional wedding, you can't really make it an adventure. You're going to be getting married at a church, or you're going to be getting married at a winery, and that's kind of where you're going to be. And again, I'm not saying these things are bad. I love these sorts of weddings, but we're talking about intimate weddings here. So, like, get out of here. But what you can do with an intimate wedding is you can, like we discussed already, you can get married anywhere. So I did an intimate wedding a few months ago where they wanted to get married out in the middle of the country, bit of a four-wheel drive trek. So they got everyone in some four-wheel drives. We drove out there. They had this amazing ceremony, beautiful spot, like surrounded by mountains. We were able to shoot our portraits right there as well, which is really, really sick. But basically what they did was they made an adventure of it. Everybody got in the four-wheel drives. We trekked out there. They brought food, canapes, champagne, beer. They made a big experience of it. We did later go back to a reception venue and kind of have like a dinner there, but they made this an adventure. It was more fun. It was more outgoing. There was more of a process and a journey to the ceremony than just rocking up to a venue. And you have that flexibility and those opportunities when you're doing a smaller size, more intimate wedding. Number 9, experiences over things. This is kind of piggybacking off the back of what we were just talking about, where the younger generation, the generation that's typically the ones getting married right now, which is like the lower age bracket millennials, higher age bracket Gen Z, I believe. They value experiences over things more. And you see this in the way they like to travel. These people don't necessarily want to own expensive cars and expensive handbags and all this sort of stuff. They want to travel, they want to experience things, they want to, do stuff. And that's reflected in the way that these people kind of want to plan their weddings. So when you're having a traditional wedding, things tend to follow more of a strict timeline, a strict kind of plan. And so there's a lot of things that you tend to book for a traditional wedding that I know people don't necessarily need, or they don't really think they want, they do it. And that costs a lot of money, and that is taking away from things. With an intimate wedding, because you get to make it an adventure, you get to do things, you get to explore and make it more fun, make it more unique, make it more you. Maybe you don't spend $20,000 on a dress, maybe you spend $20,000 getting your guests to an amazing location, like a drop-dead gorgeous location that's important or special to you. We've all seen this with weddings, people kind of showcasing how much money they have. And I'm not saying that every traditional wedding does this, but a lot of them do. It's kind of like, look at me, look how much money I spent on my dress, look how much money I spent on the cars, look how much money we spent on the venue. And it's kind of like a money flash. Whereas intimate weddings, it's a lot less about the money you spent, and it's a lot more about the experience you and your guests get from the day. And number 10, genuine, authentic, and honest are 3 ways that I would definitely describe intimate weddings. And that kind of piggybacks again off the last point, is that everybody has a sense of values that they live by, right? And if your sense of values is that you kind of like things to be perfect, you like things to be very traditional, there's nothing wrong with that. And then maybe a traditional wedding is for you. But if your sense of values is honesty and authenticness, then maybe an intimate wedding is for you. Instead of starting off your married life by chasing perfection and following tradition and doing things that you don't want to do and spending money you don't want to spend just because you have to, it's going to be a more authentic and genuine start to your married life. It's going to reflect who you are better, and it's going to make you feel better as you enter this next chapter. And kind of going off that, the authenticity aspect as well, with big weddings, again, not all of them, but some of them are a big show. It's kind of like, look at us, look what we can do, look how much money we have. Whereas an intimate wedding, it's not about the spectacle. It's about the genuineness of what marriage is. It's 2 people coming together who are in love, who want to spend the rest of their lives together. So instead of putting on this giant show, They just want their nearest and dearest, their closest friends and family to celebrate their marriage with them. And if that's in the backyard, if that's just a property that they've rented out, then so be it. There's no need for the big show, the big song and dance. It's much more authentic and it feels more genuine, and it feels, for me, and for people who intimate weddings are right for, it feels a lot more right. So what are my 5 biggest tips for planning an intimate wedding? Well, number 1, keep it small. There's no need to make it larger than it needs to be. The smaller the wedding, the more intimate the wedding, the greater it's gonna feel and the cheaper it's gonna be. Number 2, make a weekend of it. Why just get married on a Saturday? Why not get guests in on a Friday, at the property? They can have some pizzas and some drinks, get married on the Saturday, have a great time, party the night away, and then have like a recovery brunch on the Sunday and make a whole weekend of it with your best and closest friends and family. Number 3, invest in what is important to you. Because you're having an intimate wedding and you're not, going and spending all this additional money on these vendors that are traditional for weddings, but not really essential. If you want to know who they are, you can message me. You can focus on who's more important to you. So for example, if you love florals and flowers are a really big aspect of your life, you can go and spend some money on flowers. The money you've saved on not having a traditional wedding, you can spend on flowers. If photos and video is super important to you, then you can go and spend a lot of money on getting the best photo and video team you can imagine, because again, you can be saving a lot of money on the traditional wedding. You can afford it over here. Number 4, choose your guests wisely. We've already touched on this. The closer they are to you, the more they love you, the more you love them, the better it's gonna be for you. Don't go inviting partners, don't go inviting work colleagues, don't go inviting people who effectively you don't really care about. If you don't see these people being in your life for the rest of your life, they're probably not worth inviting. And 5, don't worry about people who you don't invite. This is the biggest thing. People freak out that people are going to be upset. They're going to be angry with them. They're going to be resentful that they weren't invited to the wedding. First of all, if they don't understand, they're not really much of a friend to you. So probably better off to get rid of them. But my biggest piece of advice for that is have an engagement party. So this is actually what we did for our wedding. We had a big engagement party with all of our friends and family. I think it was probably like 120 people, something like that. And we actually just had that in the back of my in-laws' house, which is quite large. And they all got invited because we knew that when the wedding came around, we were only wanting to have 55 to 60 people. And that's what we did. So have a big engagement party, or have the intimate wedding and then have a big party afterwards to celebrate the wedding. You can have that, a month, 2, 3, 6, 12 months later. So that's pretty much the 10 biggest benefits to having an intimate wedding. If it sounds like something that would be right for you, then if you're in my area, please hit me up. If not, hit up some photographers and start talking to them. They're going to have the experience and the wisdom to put together a game plan for you, and they probably know some amazing vendors who will get on board and make your dream come true. All right, that's it for me today. Stay tuned. See you in the next video. Peace.